Well, welcome to the Royal BC Museum. My name is Chris O'Connor, and I'm a program developer in the Learning and Engagement Department here at the Royal BC Museum. And it's a real honor and privilege to be able to work in this at this museum. The Royal BC Museum is a natural history museum that looks at the history and the objects and specimens of across the province of British Columbia. Um, and just before we begin, I just wanted to share a couple of slides. So Liz, my colleague Liz, will start those slides. So this program that we're doing today is Surviving Winter. We're just in the beginning of the winter season, and it's starting to get cold. Victoria, not so much snow, but other places in British Columbia, it might be snowing now. But it is the season to especially for animals in British Columbia, to start thinking about how best to prepare for the winter months. And the animals across British Columbia prepare in very different ways. So we're going to explore some of that today. But first and foremost, the most important thing is where we are as a museum right now. So we're located on the territory of the Lekwungen people, now known as the Songhees and Swepson Nations. And we extend our appreciation for the opportunity to live and learn on this territory, and we're incredibly mindful of the fact that this museum is situated and exists within this territory. If you haven't been to the museum before, as it's because some people are joining from outside of Canada. So we are in Canada, but the very far west coast of Canada is almost as far west coast as you can get. We're that little dot there. We're in the province of British Columbia, and we're on the island of Vancouver Island. So it's a very large island, and we'll be talking about some of the animals that specifically live on Vancouver Island. And when we're talking about some of the animals, just think about the island as it is. To drive up and down the island, it takes hours and hours and hours. So some of the one animal we'll be talking about in particular is about like halfway up the island, maybe where the V is, or the U in the middle of Vancouver. So have this image of the map in your mind as we're talking about that particular animal that we'll come back to. And then we are in the city of Victoria at the very bottom of the island. And if you were standing on the steps looking at the museum, you would see this building. So to the left is our exhibits building, where our galleries are, and to the right is that big tower is our collections tower, and right in front of that is the BC Archives building. So imagine you're walking up those steps, you're walking through the door, you take the escalator up to the second floor, and here you are meeting myself and my colleague, who I'm going to turn the camera around. Say hello to my colleague, Anna Chin. Hi. Anna.
Hi, everyone at home.
Anna, you work here at the museum. What do you do?
I'm the collections manager of birds and mammals. And that means that I take care of all the collections behind the scenes. We're going to be exploring the galleries today, but usually I work in the Fannin Tower off to my left, taking care of 80,000 bird mammal specimens.
Wow. And what made you interested in working in a museum?
Well, I did my schooling in biology, and as an undergrad, got a chance to take a look at what was behind the scenes at the museum at my school, and I was blown away by how much museums are that you don't see as a public visitor. Lots of research being done. This collection is used for research. We keep it as this record of what existed in the past, and that was just mind-blowing to me, and inspired me to
be part of that.
Exactly.
Yeah. And when you're a collection, so we'll walk over to the table over here. As a collection manager, you look after the specimens, which is a fancy, what does that word mean?
So
specimen.
Specimens in this case mean dead, preserved animals. So here I brought out a specimen for us to look at. This is a skull. So it's a skull of a particular animal. We'll ask you guys to guess what you think this might be, but it's a dead animal that's been dried and preserved so that we can keep it for future research.
And then, yeah, so this is a really good example of, hey, this is a really good example of a specimen that if you were to see this animal out in the wild, you wouldn't be able to get this close and especially see how its skull is shaped and even the history that's sort of embedded within the skull.
Mm-hmm.
So our question to you, we're putting you to work out there. What animal is this? What animal skull is this? So, and you might, yeah, Anna, what are the things that you would be looking at if you were? And you could put in the chat your answers.
Notice the skinny black horns, the long nose. Then I take a look at the teeth. You can see they're sharp and especially adapted for kind of ripping and grinding.
Beautiful teeth too.
Mm-hmm. They're really interesting shape.
So we have one guess so far, and it's mountain goat ? So Anna, is that true?
That's true, correct. This is a mountain
Ding,
goat
ding, ding.
skull.
And we actually, as a museum, sometimes we're looking at bones, and sometimes we're looking at the whole animal through taxidermy. So if we're thinking about mountain goats, this is the skull, but we have a mountain goat pretty close by.
Yeah.
Shall we go check it out? And because we're looking at animals and how they survive in the winter, let's start to think about how this particular animal, this mountain goat, would survive in the winter.
Yeah, mountain goats are a really special animal for BC. More than half of all mountain goats in the world live in BC. So we're really lucky.
Wait, can you say that again? That's
half of all mountain goats in the world live in BC.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty amazing. And they live up in the Alpine on mountains, as their name suggests. And as you can imagine, mountains in the winter get cold and snowy and fairly uninhabitable for most animals. But mountain goats really don't mind. They have these nice furry coats that help them survive the winter. But you can see that their little hooves are really well adapted to climb mountains, to allow them to jump up on rocky ledges in places that helps them avoid predators. But in the snow, mountain goats don't do very well. You can imagine that if you were to think about your own boot going through a pile of snow, that would be exactly how a mountain goat would react if they had to walk across the snow. So in the wintertime, mountain goats, they'll travel down from the highest of elevations down to areas where they can find food that's not covered in snow, and areas where they can still use their hooves to traverse the rocky terrain. So in the wintertime, they will move around the landscape to survive during the wintertime.
And do they, and we can continue walking, is that, are they in packs or do they roam together, or are they more solitary animals?
Yeah, it depends on the population, actually. A lot of them do live in kind of loose family groups, but many do kind of venture off by themselves, especially the males during the summer will venture off by themselves. The females often will stick around with the babies.
Sorry, just wanted to make sure that. So we're walking through the gallery right now. So sorry, say that again. So
it depends on the population of the mountain goats. Males will often, especially during the summer, kind of venture off by themselves, and females will stick around with their young. Yeah.
So we're walking through the gallery. We're speaking of winter and cold. We're passing by our Ice Age diorama with the famous woolly mammoth. And then we're gonna go into this section over here because there's an animal, especially when we're looking at animals that are adapting to how our environments are changing because of changing climate. There's one very furry animal close by here that we'll take a look at next. And it's this one right here. So Anna, what can you tell us about this animal?
So this is a Vancouver Island marmot, another really special animal for BC. Vancouver Island marmot is what we call an endemic species. So an endemic species means they're only found in BC, and Vancouver Island marmot is specifically only found on Vancouver Island. You can't find them anywhere else in the world. And they're critically endangered. There are only about 300 Vancouver Island marmots left. You can find them, as Chris said, right?
Yeah.
Kind of in the middle of Vancouver Island in a park called Strathcona. And these marmots, they live in big family groups in the alpine meadows in Strathcona. They forage together in their families with their siblings and their children and their nieces and nephews. And they'll live they make burrows underground where they live, and they have babies, and they hibernate. So during the winter, when it's too cold and windy and snowy up in the alpine, Vancouver Island marmot, after gorging themselves all summer, eating as much as they possibly can to get nice and plump for the winter time, around October, they'll retreat to their burrows with all of their family, and they'll go into hibernation. And so what this means is that their heart rates will slow down, their breathing slows down, and their body temperature actually drops to about the same temperature as in their burrows, so about 5 degrees Celsius. And usually in the summer, their body temperatures are, somewhere around 35 degrees. So you can imagine they're cooling their bodies off so that they don't have to use as much energy to stay alive. And so over the course of 7 months, from around October to March or April, they'll be in the state of slow dormancy so that they can stay alive during the winter.
It's amazing. And does that happen with other marmots as well, or is that this specifically with the Vancouver Island marmot?
It happens with lots of other marmot species. Yellow-bellied marmot do the same thing. Lots of small mammals, especially in the squirrel family, will hibernate. Lots of small mammals that are able to efficiently cool their bodies off will do this exact same kind of thing, retreat and just go into the state of dormancy so that they can conserve energy over the course of the winter, because it's just too cold for them to survive above ground.
If anyone has any questions as you're watching and you're hearing Anna talk about some of these really fascinating animals, please feel free to just use the chat and ask the question as we go along. I have a question just in terms of, you talked about the marmots gorging themselves on food. What kind of food do marmots eat?
They eat mostly plants, like vegetation that they forage in these alpine meadows. They'll eat all sorts of parts of the plants, from the green material to the roots, lots of seeds and that they find in the meadows as well. Yeah.
And that's one of the things that maybe you'll talk about later as well, is if animals have enough food during the winter, then they wouldn't need to hibernate.
Yeah.
So it's harder for marmots to find the food that they need during the winter.
Yeah, you can imagine that if the meadows are all covered in snow, what would a marmot to do during the winter? So when food is really plentiful, they eat as much as they possibly can, and will gain sometimes up to 50% of their weight before going into hibernation, and then lose it all because they're expending all of the energy stored in their fat reserves over the course of the winter time.
We were debating about having the program be called What a Marmot to Do. Maybe next year. Yeah. So let's look at some of those other animals that maybe have a different kind of way of adapting to the environment. during winter. So we're going to continue on in the gallery here, just near our forest diorama. We're going to go into this special little room here called the Mammal Den that some of you maybe have seen and some of you maybe haven't seen. So we have some of our animal friends in this room. And especially some animals that are really interesting in relation to the to winter. So Anna, what would you like to show us first?
So I brought out some ptarmigan. These are a species of ptarmigan called rock ptarmigan. We have 3 different species of ptarmigan in BC, but these ones, you can see I have 2 different animals. One of them is brown and mottled, and the other one is white.
So this is the same animal,
Yeah, same
or
species,
the same species,
yeah, but 2 different color morphs. This brown one is what we would see rock ptarmigan look like in the summer months. And you can, they like the mountain goat and the Vancouver Island marmot also live up on mountains and north in the tundra. So you can imagine that this ptarmigan, all brown and mottled, would really blend in with rocky outcroppings in the alpine.
as protection.
As protection, yeah. They're delicious, tasty snacks for all sorts of different kinds of predators, including eagles.
Eagles right there.
See up here. And mountain lions. Ptarmigan are a little bit like mountain chickens, and they can fly, but prefer mostly to live on the ground. So they're pretty easy pickings if you can get your hands on them.
Your jaws on them.
Yeah. So during the summer, they have this nice brown mottled plumage. And then during the winter, when it becomes snowy up in the alpine and up north, they molt and change their plumage to this nice bright white. And this lets them blend in, camouflage with the snow in the landscape.
Except for a little color at the right between the beak and the eye.
Yeah, in life, often it's even bright red.
Oh yeah. Oh, the same red.
Yeah. Yeah, and so if you can imagine that on a snowy backdrop, if these white birds are staying particularly still, it'd be really hard to pick them out as a predator.
So that's one of the ways that the rock ptarmigan can survive the winter is by changing what they look within their environment.
Yep.
Nice.
Yep. Losing all their feathers and regrowing a nice new set.
And I'm noticing that the feet.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say something about that.
Yeah. So ptarmigan, all species of ptarmigan have these amazing feathery feet. Think about what most bird feet look like. They're kind of scaly and reptilian, look a little bit like snakes. But ptarmigan, instead
Actually,
of... Oh yeah,
you can just go over to... It really does look like snakes.
Yeah, you can tell that they have
with that
reptile ancestors.
Yeah.
But instead of the scales, ptarmigan, especially in the winter, have feathery feet. And the feathers on their feet allow their feet to act a little bit like snowshoes. They increase the surface area of their feet and make them a little bit more light and lofty and allow them to walk on snow without sinking into the snow like the mountain goat would. So they're specially adapted to walk over top of the snow so that they can live successfully during the winter.
Yeah, especially if they're not flying, like other birds might fly and rest on branches and they're down on the ground. Yeah,
they'll even make little burrows in snowbanks and roost in the snow. Because snow is nicely insulated, so if you can make a burrow in the snow and live successfully there, it's actually fairly toasty and warm and
Hmm.
protected from predators.
So like the marmot wouldn't be able to get the kind of food that it needed
Mhm.
during the winter, but the ptarmigan can.
Yeah. Yeah, ptarmigan forage for seeds over the winter. They'll eat conifer seeds.
Oh, okay. And you talked about feet and the snow. I was thinking maybe we can go over to the wolf because maybe there's a similar kind of principle that's playing now. So this is our wolf in this room. Hello. And if you look down, it does, well, this looks like maybe a dog from your home, but especially when you look at the paws of the wolf, they're much bigger actually than your standard dog that you would see in a family home.
And they have these nice big paws that are specially adapted for both silent walking and for staying above the snow as they hunt during winter. Yeah, they're active all year long, just like the mountain goat and the ptarmigan.
And I imagine also like having some white fur is helpful, less about things attacking the wolf than letting the wolf attack other things, right? To be able to sneak up on
being
on things.
stealthy.
Yeah.
And during the winter as well, they'll, I mean, maybe you've noticed this in your dogs at home, but wolves will grow an even thicker coat during the winter and then shed it during the summer to keep them a little bit warmer and more well insulated when they have to be outside in the cold.
Right. And so the wolf is pretty big, but the biggest animal in this room is right behind us here. That's the bear.
The bear. So these bears, I'm sure, are what most people think of when they think of winter hibernators. It's kind of the first image that pops into our heads, the bears in their dens, sleeping over the course of the winter. But bears actually, they hibernate in a really different way from the Vancouver Island marmot and other small mammal species. Because they're so big, it would just be completely impossible for bears to lower their body temperatures in the same way that Vancouver Island marmot does. They still, when they go into hibernation, they still slow their breathing and slow their heart rate, but their body temperature stays about the same. And so over the course of the winter, while they hibernate, the bears actually kind of wake up every once in a while. And they're quite easily aroused when if they're bothered in their dens. The bears, like the Vancouver Island marmot, need to eat a ton before going into hibernation. This like massive animal needs so much energy on a day-to-day basis to keep them alive. So before they go into hibernation, they'll eat sometimes 20,000 calories a day just to prepare. And so they're constantly, especially during the late summer and early fall, eating as much as they possibly can, and berries and fish and roots.
And what kind of bear is this?
This is a grizzly bear. You can tell because of kind of the shape of its head, it's a little bit more robust than the black bear, and this big hump on its back. It has a big hump because it's well adapted for digging. And so it develops this large muscle on its back from all of the digging that it does.
And this is a pretty big bear, but you said there are lots of grizzly bears that are much bigger than this.
Yeah. Grizzly bears get huge. Whereas this, I think this would be a pretty big black bear if we were to see a black bear in life.
Right. And so are the bears hibernating by them on their own during the winter?
Yeah, most.
Because you were talking about the marmots being all together.
Most adult bears will hibernate by themselves, but actually, mama bears will give birth during hibernation. So they'll go into hibernation pregnant and then give birth a couple months into their dormancy, and then nurse their cubs all winter long.
And that's when you were talking about how they could wake themselves up, or they wake up a little bit to give birth and then and then go back to sleep.
I think I read somewhere that mothers who are nursing are in kind of a less deep state of hibernation.
Yeah.
And then a yearling cub, a cub who's just been born, will hibernate with its mom for the next winter.
Oh. So we've looked at bears, we've looked at wolves, we've looked at rock ptarmigans, we've looked at marmots and mountain goats. Does anyone out there watching have any questions about any of these animals or any other animals that you think of when you're thinking of surviving winter? Feel free to just add into the chat any questions you might have. And one question I had earlier, whether what other animals hibernate besides marmots and bears, and you were saying bats, and I see a little bat right there.
Yeah, bats hibernate in large colonies, and they'll come back to the same hibernation ground year after year. It's what we call a hibernaculum. And they do a similar kind of hibernation strategy as marmots, where they'll slow down all of their body processes and cool off their bodies, and go into this long state of dormancy.
All right, so if we don't have any other question, oh, I do see one question that just came in. So the question from Anna, another Anna, but spelled a little differently. Do aquatic animals have their habits impacted by the winter?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I'm thinking of specifically our humpback whales, which migrate during the winter. When it gets too cold and there isn't enough food in the waters up north here, they'll leave in the fall and go down south or out to Hawaii to have their babies and to feed on all of the rich aquatic life that's out there. So I guess like birds, they'll leave for the winter and then come back during the summer.
I'm wondering, maybe a follow-up question with that, because you talked about the wolves and their fur changing over the seasons. Does that happen with things like a otter or other
I'm sure it does.
mammals, sea mammals?
It's one of the easiest strategies is to kind of have this yearly cycle of molting. It helps the animal refresh their coat and helps them adapt to these different changing seasonal conditions.
Especially in particular, the coldness of the water.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, great question, Anna. Thank you. And great answer, Anna.
Team Anna.
Yeah, Team Anna. We have a book that we'd like to share as well. And this book actually we'll come down and here I'll have us both. We'll have us both in the site for just a second. Hello. So this book is about foxes. And so Anna, I was wondering if there's anything about foxes. Are the foxes in British Columbia?
Yeah, there are foxes in British Columbia, not on Vancouver Island. But yeah, we have red foxes in British Columbia, and they're active all winter. They hunt mostly small mammals that are also active, and walk over the snow. Some often there's even, I don't believe they're in British Columbia, but like Arctic foxes will molt in a similar way to ptarmigan and turn white during the winter.
Great. All right, so I'm going to hand this over to Anna. And just thinking about the winter, this is a book that we wanted to share. I'm thinking about surviving the winter, and it's called I Follow the Fox. And it's by Rob Biddle. So this morning, I lost little Fox in the park. We searched and we searched until long after dark, but we just couldn't find him. And now all I see is the space next to Big Fox where Little should be. So has a big fox and a little fox, and the little fox is missing. My heart and my eyelids are heavy as stone as I think of my fox in the park all alone. But then from outside, something's calling my name. I'm drawn to the window, a moth to the flame. A beautiful fox sitting there in the snow. Her fur is afire and her eyes are aglow. She nods and then walks past the old letter box, and I make my decision to follow the fox. She reminds me of Little, her tail's just like that. And maybe, just maybe, she knows where he is. Oh, I forgot the top part. I pull on my coat and I scamper outside, and there by the tree stands my rusty red guide. She reminds me of Little, her tail's just like that his, and maybe, just maybe, she knows where he is. I follow the fox as she moves without flaw through a city she knows like the back of her paw, past hotels and hospitals, car parks and clocks. There's hope in my heart as I follow the fox. Faster and faster we leap and we bound, so fast that I'm no longer touching the ground. She going over the ground like that. She runs like the wind, but I stay on her tail as we leave behind street lights and enter the vale. Onwards she sprints and a red dart through the night, across meadows tucked up beneath duvets of white. Under the viaduct, down to the hollow, wherever she's headed, I surely will follow. We start to slow down where the river runs cold, and the moon paints its surface with silver and gold. And then the fox stops, and I'm there at her side. As she looks to the water, her eyes open wide, so looking out over it. And the little fox is there, a tiny fox cub with a fluffy red pelt on an island of ice that is starting to melt. She shivers a little. He's too young to swim, and I realize he's trapped and his chances are slim. Good thing she floats. At this very moment, it's suddenly clear. This cub is the reason the fox brought me here. So I walk to the water, I close both my eyes, and I stretch out my arms, and then slowly I rise. I take a deep breath as I fly through the air, then I scoop up the fox, and taking great care, I fly back to the bank with a smile on my face, and the fox greets her cub in a loving embrace. This warm, fuzzy scene melts the snow on my brow as the stars start to fade and the night starts to bow. Then the sun gives her light to the blossoming day, and a promise of hope shines in every new ray. I stand on the rocks amid water and foam and nod from the fox as it's time to go home. She leaves with her cub and I rise from the rocks, and for one final time I will follow the fox. We fly through the hollow and the meadows and the vale. She runs like the wind, but I stay on her tail. Now we're back in the city. We round the last bend. Then we stop by the tree and I see an old friend. Little Stuffy is in the tree there. Gently the fox reaches up for my toy. Then she brings him to me and my heart fills with joy. And I'm sure that my guide has a smile on her face as I greet little fox in a loving embrace. Now I'm back in my bed and I open my eyes and I stretch out my arms and slowly I rise. Little fox, Mommy says as she stands in the call. We didn't take them to the park after all. Maybe she's right. Was the whole thing a dream? Are the fox and her cub not as real as they seem? But then from outside, something's calling my name, and I smile a big smile. And the fox does the same. A little winter adventure of the foxes. A little adventure of the foxes and the humans too, because we are also surviving winter. We're also exploring the worlds around us and finding ways to make things a little bit easier in the winter months as well. So many things: mountain goats, marmots, wolves, ptarmigan, bears, foxes, and us humans too. So that's the end of our program. Anna, do you have any final words or thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's good to remember that we're not too dissimilar from the animals, that we too have to rely on our families and to stay warm and cozy over the winter.
Yeah.
And yeah, feed ourselves well, stay warm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't, our fur doesn't change too much, but we do have big puffy coats
Mhm.
usually in the winter. So
Yeah.
it's similar that way. And so for everyone out there, thanks so much for joining. And if you're hibernating, have a good hibernation. And if not, just have a good winter. And we'll see you next time. All right. Bye, everyone.